We now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Pete Wishart.
And thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to ensure that the nomination of a Prime Minister and the appointment of his or her Cabinet be a matter for this House. And this is the third time, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have attempted to bring this bill forward to the House. First time it had to be withdrawn because of a general election. The second time because of the COVID lockdown. So I was trying today, Madam Deputy Speaker, to ensure that no other disaster was to befall me so that I could be here in my place to deliver this bill. One of the most curious things about the whole concept of parliamentary sovereignty is the fact that this House is not in the least bit sovereign in the nomination of a Prime Minister. Shrouded in semi-mysticism and quasi-convention, this House plays absolutely no part in the process of deciding or determining the nomination of Prime Minister, save serving solely as a mere spectator. So what my bill does is to put that right, by ensuring that the nomination of a Prime Minister and his or her Cabinet is a matter for this House and ensure that we, as representatives of the people of this country, have a role to play in handing over the keys to the most powerful office and offices in this land. Firstly, what it's not. This bill would not in the least alter the role of Her Majesty the Queen in the proceedings at all. The appointment of a Prime Minister will still be exclusively the job of Her Majesty the Queen as part of her prerogative powers. But what this bill actually does is to strengthen the constitutional convention of keeping the monarch out of politics by ensuring that she would appoint a Prime Minister having had that nominee agreed by this House. What my bill in effect seeks to do is to bring this House into the 21st century and replicate the conditions that we find in most other properly functioning representative democracies right around the world, and even what we find in properly functioning representative democracies in the rest of the United Kingdom. In the Scottish Parliament, the First Minister and her Cabinet have to be approved by the Scottish Parliament and MSPs, as do the Welsh and Northern Irish Assemblies. Even the London Assembly works on this basis. It's a process that allows confirmation from Parliament and even alternatives to emerge to see if he or she might have the confidence of the House. What it would do would be to end the current situation where a Prime Minister of this country can be decided by a few thousand members of the Conservative Party. It would end the practice of this House having a Prime Minister foisted upon it without even as much as a take your leave, where the Conservative Association, say, of Tunbridge Wells has more of a say than a directly elected Member of Parliament to determine who the Prime Minister is. And I hear the hears from the Conservative Party member opposite, who obviously enjoy that particular privilege. Let's just have a cursory look at how we had the good fortune to get our current Prime Minister. The current Prime Minister was appointed by Her Majesty as a result of winning the Conservative leadership contest that was triggered by the resignation of the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead, who was first appointed Prime Minister on 31st of July 2016 as a result of the resignation of David Cameron as Prime Minister in July 2016. Since 2015, the UK has had 2 Prime Ministers appointed outside of a general election, determined exclusively by the membership of the Conservative Party of the United Kingdom. And looking at the current incumbent, we could only surmise at the efficacy and good sense inherent in the current arrangements. Madam Deputy Speaker, this House must never again have an unelected Prime Minister forced upon it. A Prime Minister must be able to demonstrate that she or he has the confidence of this House at the inception of his or her premiership. My bill will ensure that that will never happen again. And what my bill also does, Madam Deputy Speaker, is to help deal with some of the issues that might unexpectedly arise in the course of a parliamentary term. Just say, for example, a Prime Minister losing a referendum on the European Union and having to resign. This current Prime Minister also actually wiped away his own majority himself by banishing those that disagreed with his hard Brexit from the ranks of the Conservative Party. His government was left in an absolute minority, but yet he was still able to control the order paper of the House of Commons while lacking the ability to pass any meaningful legislation. And then what did he do, Madam Deputy Speaker? He illegally prorogued Parliament to prevent the Brexit purgatory being effectively scrutinised, and he unnecessarily drew the Queen into illegal political proceedings, something that this bill would seek to address and to rectify. Quite frankly, there is no way, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the current Prime Minister would have been approved by this House, as he would not have been able to demonstrate that confidence in the last session of Parliament. And if this procedure was in place, available to us last year, we could only speculate as to whether the UK would be in a better place if we had that facility in place then. So what would trigger this Act? Well, any general election, of course. Any general election under the terms of the Fixed Term Parliament Act 2011, the Queen accepted the Prime Minister's resignation, the Prime Minister's office becoming vacant for reasons other than resignation, mainly death, the Prime Minister ceasing to be a member of the House of Commons as a result of a recall or crime, which of course we would never imagine would ever happen with this current incumbent. But let's look specifically at one of these examples, because I think it's quite timely and it's quite relevant. All of us are rightly relieved to see the Prime Minister back in such rude health, press-upping his way to his disastrous Brexit. And looking at this epitome of a butcher's dog, it's hard to believe that it was touch and go for him only a few short weeks ago, and thank goodness that the Prime Minister pulled through. But what we found with the Prime Minister's incapacitation was the equivalent of government by headless chicken. Without the Prime Minister's customary decisiveness and note for detail, we actually had no real idea who was running the country. It seemed to be the Foreign Secretary who was in charge by deeming of being the First Secretary, but he executed these responsibilities with all the guile of Emu without the assistance of Rod Hull. His only qualification for that role seemed to be that Dominic Cummings couldn't think of anybody else. Maybe he would have done the job had we had a Deputy Prime Minister, but of course we no longer have a Deputy Prime Minister. An unpaid, powerless position that sometimes and sometimes not deputised for the Prime Minister seems to have gone the same way as Nick Clegg. So what my bill does, Madam Deputy Speaker, is to create the office of Acting Prime Minister to ensure that there is someone accountable for the operation of government until a stricken PM recovers or another is found. But my bill does much more than that. It would seek to ensure that the whole apparatus of government be a matter for this House, that the activities of wider government and all its advisory function and capacity becomes under the responsibility of Parliament. Right now, there seems to be some sort of initiative to reinvent the civil service in the guise of a hard Brexit organisation. There is a politicisation of the civil servants being undertaken, the likes of which we have never seen or encountered in this country before. There is a state apparatus being assembled in the guise of Dominic Cummings, who now effectively runs Whitehall. And we, in this House, have no right of scrutiny or the ability to properly consider all this activity that is going on. The extraordinary sight of a government advisor making a press statement to the country from the Downing Street Rose Garden could be the metaphor in how this country is now actually being governed. So what my bill will do, Madam Deputy Speaker, is to codify certain aspects of the Ministerial Code to ensure that the whole of government is accountable to this House. Ministers will have a duty to Parliament to account and be held accountable for the policies, decisions and actions of their departments and agencies. My bill would uphold the political impartiality of the civil service and assure that civil servants would not be required to act in any way which would conflict with the Civil Service Code as set out in the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act of 2010. Madam Deputy Speaker, my little bill is simple in scope, but it's ambitious in what it wants to achieve. Our unwritten constitution, designed by convention, needs updated and refreshed, and that should start with the appointment of a Prime Minister and his or her cabinet. We must never again have a Prime Minister nominated without consent of this House. We must start to exert control and authority in what's done in this government's name. This is a sensible and practical bill to bring this House into the 21st century, and I beg to move and commend this bill to this House.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill.